And Madam Secretary, would you please introduce this morning's agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to you. Good morning, Commissioners. For today's meeting, you will hear 3 items for your consideration. First, you will consider a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking on promoting the integrity and security of telecommunications certification bodies, measurement facilities, and the equipment authorization program. Second, you will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking on protecting our communications networks by promoting transparency regarding foreign adversary control. Third, you will consider a further notice of proposed rulemaking on more intensive use of the 12.7 gigahertz and 42 gigahertz bands by satellite communications. This is your agenda for today. Today's first item is titled Safeguarding the Equipment Authorization Process from Bad Labs, and will be presented by the Office of Engineering and Technology. Acting Chief of the Office, Ira Keltz, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Chief Keltz, please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. OET is pleased to present for your consideration a report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking that would adopt rules to help ensure the integrity of the supply chain for communications devices by focusing on entities that carry out important responsibilities as part of the Commission's Equipment Authorization Program, and propose to seek comment on further measures to safeguard the integrity of our Equipment Authorization Program. The actions in this report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking, if adopted, would advance the Commission's efforts to protect against national security threats to communication supply chain through the Commission's Equipment Authorization Program by bolstering TCB, test lab, and accreditation body oversight to prevent undue influence by foreign adversaries and other untrustworthy actors that present national security risks. Joining me at the table is Jamie Coleman, Associate Chief, who led and coordinated the cross-bureau team working on this item. I also want to acknowledge Dana Schaefer, OET's Deputy Chief, who unfortunately is unable to join us this morning. Jamie will now present the item.
Thank you, Ira. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking before you would provide new rules and seek further comment on various additional actions aimed at further ensuring the integrity of participants in our Equipment Authorization Program. This includes test labs, which test devices to the Commission's technical standards, telecommunication certification bodies, which review the certification applications, including the technical test reports for compliance with our rules, and laboratory accreditation bodies, which assess and accredit test labs to ensure they meet quality standards and demonstrate compliance. Since 2022, the Commission's Equipment Authorization Program rules have included requirements designed to prevent authorization of equipment that threatens national security. Accordingly, the integrity of our Equipment Authorization Program and those entities that participate in this program is critical to ensuring that our nation's communications networks and supply chains are protected from national security threats. The report and order would prohibit from participation in our Equipment Authorization Program any TCB, test lab, or laboratory accreditation body that is owned by or subject to the direction or control of a prohibited entity. The order defines the scope of the term prohibited entity by relying on federal government agency or congressional determinations identifying entities that pose national security threats, including foreign adversaries. To achieve efficient implementation and enforcement of this prohibition, we would expand our current reporting and certification requirements to require certification regarding ownership, control, or direction, as well as reporting all equity and voting interests of 5% or more. We would also amend our rules to prohibit recognition and withdraw existing recognition of any TCB, test lab, or laboratory accreditation body that fails to provide or provides inaccurate information regarding ownership, equity, or voting interests. The further notice of proposed rulemaking would propose and seek comment on further measures to safeguard the integrity of the Equipment Authorization Program. Specifically, we would seek comment on extending the prohibitions in the report and order to include entities subject to the jurisdiction of a foreign adversary. We would also seek further comment on ways the Commission can facilitate and encourage more equipment authorization testing to occur within the United States or allied countries. Finally, we would propose to revise post-market surveillance procedures to ensure compliance with prohibitions on authorization of covered equipment. Staff recommends adoption of this item and requests editorial privileges solely for technical and conforming edits. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. We will now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The simplest way to make sure our networks are safe is to keep bad equipment out in the first place. Over the past few years, we've worked hard to update our equipment authorization rules consistent with the Secure Equipment Act, but our equipment authorization process is only as strong as the sum of its parts. We place a great deal of trust on TCBs, test labs, accreditation bodies that are widely dispersed around the globe. Historically, this hasn't been a problem. In many ways, it offers benefits to our innovators to efficiently be able to test their products no matter their location before offering them to United States customers. But we face an increasing risk that adversarial nations will try to sneak insecure and harmful equipment into our networks through our equipment authorization process. And so to mitigate that threat, we need to know that when a test lab certifies equipment, it is doing so on the merits and not due to undue influence from an adversary. The information collected proposed in this item will ensure that the third parties we use to ensure conformity to our rules are themselves acting in good faith. You can count me in. Equally important is that when we identify a TCB test lab or accreditation body that is owned, controlled, or subject to the direction of a prohibited entity, we alert manufacturers and the public to stop using them. I'm happy that the item now directs Public Safety to release a public notice doing just that, and thank the chair and his team for working with me on that edit. Thank you to the office for their hard work and to all the staff that contributed. It has my support. I will approve. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Symington.
Thanks very much. So this is obviously a major step forward. This is something that the chairman's been talking about doing, and now we're doing it, and that's fantastic. So I strongly support this initiative. I think it's worth reviewing just the history of the TCB program just for a quick second. So we're now 25 years into the operation of TCBs. The concept was that it was going to prevent unprincipled acts of protectionism and reduce FCC workload and prevent needless choke points, thus increasing consumer welfare and getting more rapid uptake of technology. And I think the TCB program has accomplished all of that. However, what we are now dealing with is a potential situation where unprincipled foreign adversaries may be exploiting a program that was intended to simplify trade in order to certify equipment that we would not actually approve for use in the United States were we to do a full FCC review of it. And so this initiative is very much a step in the right direction, and it's great to see it happening. Once the material is adequately ripe for this, I think it would be great to continue extending TCB review to firmware and operating software so that we're not embedding the assumption that a device will retain factory settings forever. Obviously, sometimes if you reflash a device, it's effectively a different device and may become a non-conforming device without that being visible either to the original TCB or to the OET. Nonetheless, this is a necessary first step in getting to that point. I strongly support it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. TCBs, test labs, and laboratory accreditation bodies are the lesser known but critical players in the FCC's equipment authorization program, which makes tens of thousands of wireless devices available to businesses and consumers in the United States every year. To ensure that trustworthy devices reach the market, we need an agile and secure program with trustworthy participants. So today, we adopt rules to prevent bad actors from utilizing these key players as a backdoor to jeopardize our national security. So I want to thank the chairman for incorporating my edits to this item, including a question in the further notice that will help us better understand how these rules will impact equipment manufacturers whose devices are undergoing review at a lab that has lost the FCC's recognition. And thank you to the Office of Engineering and Technology for your hard work on this important order.
Thank you, Commissioner. Over the past several years, the FCC has worked on a bipartisan basis and across administrations to address the serious threats that foreign adversaries and other bad actors pose to our communications networks. In 2019, for instance, under Chairman Pai, the FCC took some of its first concrete steps in this new effort. That's when the FCC designated Huawei and ZTE as unacceptable threats to our national security. We then followed up on those actions by revoking the authority of risky carriers like China Mobile and China Telecom from connecting to our networks. Under Chairwoman Rosenworcel, the FCC built on these actions. For example, we prohibited Huawei, ZTE, and others on our covered list from selling new device models in this country, and we revoked additional FCC authorizations. To extend these efforts and further protect America's networks, one of my first actions as chairman was to establish a new council on national security within the agency, pulling together resources from across the FCC to effectively combat threats from foreign adversaries. I'm pleased that today we're building on all of these actions with our decision to adopt rules that address what we've called bad labs. Here's the issue. You've heard this issue at least 4 or 5 times now, but I'll summarize it again. Before any electronics can be imported or sold in the U.S., they must be tested at a lab to ensure compliance with FCC regulations. The Commission certifies these labs, and historically, they focus on compliance with technical rules like power levels and what spectrum bands devices operate on. But the closer we looked at these labs, the clearer it became that they create a potential loophole in our national security efforts. After all, these labs provide a gateway into the U.S. telecommunications infrastructure. And it's not hard to imagine that an unreliable lab, one beholden to a foreign adversary, could sign off on insecure gear entering the U.S. market. Indeed, as the Department of Justice's National Security Division recently wrote to the FCC, if foreign adversaries were to infiltrate this segment of the supply chain, they could exploit it on a broad scale, potentially authorizing compromised equipment, submitting fraudulent compliance documentation, or misappropriating sensitive intellectual property and business intelligence from U.S. companies to advance their own national interests. This threat surely is not a speculative one. Even after the FCC's national security determinations, Huawei, for instance, continued to operate its own test lab up until we took action in April of last year. Trusting a lab like Huawei to certify that it's not approving prohibited gear doesn't sound like a smart bet to me. This order will eliminate that type of risk. It establishes a rule that prohibits test labs from participating in the FCC's equipment authorization process if they are owned, controlled, or directed by entities that pose a national security risk. And this restriction will apply to foreign adversary governments, including China. We not only want to make sure that overseas labs are trustworthy, we also want to boost our capacity to test and certify imported electronic devices here in the U.S. After all, the FCC estimates that today roughly 75% of all electronics are tested in labs located inside China. That's why we'll be seeking comment on ways to reshore America's testing capacity. This is a continuation of strong bipartisan national security work from the FCC and will put our country in a better position to advance U.S. leadership. For all of their work on the item, I want to thank the FCC's staff. It's a little bit of a long list on this one, but thanks obviously to Jamie Coleman, Dana Schaefer, Krista Sinell, Zenji Nakazawa, Jim Schlichting, Michael Connolly, Rebecca Clinton, Olga Madruga-Forti, Kathleen Collins, Alexis Yankelevich, Cher Lee, Don Stockdale, Deborah Broderson, Douglas Klein, and Michael Gusso. And a special shout out to my own national security advisor, Adam Chan, for all of his work on this item and getting it across the finish line. Much appreciated. We will now proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes yes as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. And Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 2 on your agenda is titled Identifying Foreign Adversary Ownership Stakes and will be presented by the Wireline Competition Bureau, and Joseph Calashone, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Chief Calichone, welcome to the hot seat. You just took over this job this past month. We appreciate you coming back to the FCC. The Wireline Bureau is sort of a long-term home of yours. You got your start at the agency there, and really appreciate you coming back in. You do have big shoes to fill, though. You got big shoes to fill, so you got to know that at the outset. But we really appreciate your work, and please proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Wireline Competition Bureau is pleased to present for your consideration a notice of proposed rulemaking that, if adopted, would take an important step in protecting our communications networks against foreign adversary threats by proposing to expand foreign ownership disclosure requirements for covered commission-issued licenses and authorizations. I'd like to thank the Wireline Bureau team for their hard work on this item, as well as our colleagues throughout the Commission for their contributions and review. This item was a cross-agency effort, and we appreciate the collaboration with our colleagues through the Commission's new Council on National Security. With me at the table today are Allison Baker, Associate Chief in the Wireline Competition Bureau, Jody May, Chief of the Bureau's Competition Policy Division, Andrew McArdle, Senior Attorney Advisor in the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau's Mobility Division, Gabrielle Kim, Attorney Advisor in the Office of International Affairs, Telecommunications and Analysis Division, Michael Connolly, Deputy Chief of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau's Operations and Emergency Management Division, and Jordan Rath, Attorney Advisor in the Wireline Bureau's Competition Policy Division, who will now present the item.
Thank you, Joseph. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The United States government has long recognized that foreign adversaries have been engaged in a widespread and coordinated effort to exploit, attack, and otherwise compromise the integrity of U.S. communication networks to undermine U.S. national security. Foreign adversaries pose a present and persistent threat from within our networks to the extent that they act through surrogate entities that they own, control, or direct, and that hold licenses, authorizations, and other permissions granted by the Commission. Strengthening U.S. communication networks requires increased transparency and visibility into any entities holding licenses and authorizations issued by the Commission and those covered entities' relationships to foreign adversary governments. Building on the Commission's efforts to protect our communication networks, the proposals in this Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, if adopted, would give the Commission and the public a new and comprehensive view of threats from foreign adversaries. If adopted, this Notice of Proposed Rulemaking would first propose to require covered entities holding certain types of Commission licenses, permits, authorizations, or other approvals to certify as to whether they are or are not owned by, controlled by, or subject to the jurisdiction or direction of a foreign adversary. Second, it would propose to require a covered entity responding affirmatively to disclose to the Commission all ownership interests equal to or greater than 5% and the nature of their foreign adversary control. Third, it would propose to require an initial certification and a new certification within 30 days of any changes to ownership involving a foreign adversary, or for entities reporting foreign adversary control, a new ownership interest of 5% or greater. Fourth, it would propose to adopt the certification and information collection requirements for the following broad categories of licenses and authorizations: wireless, satellite, media, submarine cables, telephone, and common carrier, and others, such as equipment certifications and auction participants. Finally, the item would propose to adopt a streamlined revocation procedure in the event an entity falsely certified or failed to provide ownership information. The Bureau recommends adoption of the item and requests editorial privileges. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Starks.
Yes, no particular comment from me on this other than to say I'm glad that we are focused on national security where it appears in our authority. It wasn't always so, and so glad we're taking that seriously. Welcome, Chief.
Thanks. Commissioner Symington.
Yes, welcome, Chief. So this is obviously a measure that's in continuity with how we've always thought about foreign ownership and foreign control. And I think the difference here is we're now considering a broader waterfront because, after all, there are simply more touch points for telecommunications in an increasingly interconnected and wireless world. So I think it's a great advance and appreciate your work on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Gomez.
Thank you. Protecting our national security is a concern we all share across the political spectrum. And ensuring that foreign adversaries cannot meddle in our communications networks is critical to our national security. So I look forward to seeing comments from licensees on the benefits and burdens of the proposed requirements. I also just want to take a moment to acknowledge the elephant in the room. This item does not collect information on foreign adversary control of broadband providers. Unfortunately, without Title II authority, we are not considering whether the important guardrails to protect against our foreign adversaries we are proposing today should apply to broadband networks. The incidental coverage of some broadband providers through other license categories is insufficient when it comes to ensuring the national security of the communications technology of our time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate you working with me on edits to this item, and I also want to thank the Wireline Bureau and all the other bureaus who collaborated on this item.
Thank you, Commissioner. The FCC is taking quick and early action to promote America's national security interests. We just voted to close a potential loophole in our equipment authorization process, and we're adopting a proposal now that aligns with the age-old adage that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Foreign adversaries like China are engaged in a multi-pronged effort to identify and exploit any vulnerabilities in our communications infrastructure. We've seen this at the device level with the risks posed by Huawei and ZTE. We've seen this at the carrier level with the FCC acting to revoke the authorizations of providers like China Mobile and China Telecom. And we see it across our communications infrastructure with hacks and other cyber intrusions that have been tied back to China. For our national security strategy to succeed, we must identify risks before they can be exploited. But up to now, the FCC and relevant stakeholders have had limited visibility into the ways that foreign adversaries might exert control over the entities we regulate. Now, the FCC does collect foreign ownership information from regulated entities, but there are gaps in our information collection. Specifically, the FCC does not have a uniform approach for identifying foreign adversaries that may hold an interest in an FCC license or authorization, nor has our approach taken into account the various ways that foreign adversaries might exercise control. I've long believed that the FCC should publish a list of every entity with an FCC authorization or license that has sufficiently concerning ties back to a foreign adversary. And I've not been alone. Indeed, just last month, the House passed a bipartisan bill from Representatives Stefanik, Whitman, Castor, Keene, and Khanna that would require the FCC to obtain and publish this information. In the Senate, they've acted as well, passing legislation from Senator Fisher and Senator Rosen through the Senate Commerce Committee that tracks that House bill the very same week. I applaud these bipartisan and bicameral leaders for their call to action, and I'm pleased that the FCC is already hitting the ground running to implement this important initiative. With today's rulemaking, we're seeking comment on obtaining information necessary for the FCC to publish a list of all regulated entities that are subject to the control of a foreign adversary. As we do so, we know that there are many different paths forward, and the public's input will ultimately prove critical to the Commission's success. So I look forward to reviewing the record as it develops. This item was an agency-wide effort, much like the first, engaging staff from 7 bureaus and across 4 different offices. So I want to thank the staff for their work, including Michael Scott, Matthew Gibson, Brendan Murray, Al Schuldiner, Rebecca Clinton, Michael Connolly, Carolyn Mahoney, Andrew McArdle, Allison Baker, Jody May, Jordan Reth, Mason Sheffa, Joanna Pfister, Tanner Hinkle, Stacy Jordan, Mary Lovejoy, Dana Schaefer, Gabrielle Kim, Joseph Meyer, Douglas Klein, and Royce Sherlock. The item has my support, and we will now proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes yes as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Madam Secretary, will you please introduce the next item on today's agenda?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, item 3 on your agenda is titled Opening Up Spectrum for Satellite Broadband and will be presented by the Space Bureau. Jay Schwartz, Chief of the Bureau, will give the introduction.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Chief Schwartz, please proceed.
On behalf of the Space Bureau, good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. At the table with me is our Associate Bureau Chief, Stephen Dool, and he's going to present to you a very exciting satellite spectrum item.
Thank you.
I like that.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Today, the Space Bureau is pleased to present an item to prepare the United States for a voyage to the final frontiers by seeking comment on ways to unlock unused or underused spectrum for satellite broadband. The item before you would seek comment on expanding satellite connectivity across 4 spectrum bands: the 12.7 to 13.25 gigahertz band, the 42.0 to 42.5 gigahertz band, the 51.4 to 52.4 gigahertz band, and so-called W-band frequencies of 92 to 94 gigahertz, 92 to 94 gigahertz, 94.1 to 100 gigahertz, 102 to 109.5 gigahertz, and 118.8 to 114.25 gigahertz. Each of these bands is located in spectrum neighborhoods that are ideal for satellite broadband, but the lack of satellite service allocations and regulatory restrictions limit their potential use for space-based communications, either at fixed locations or while in motion. This notice would invite comment on ways to unlock these bands for use for satellite communications in the United States by revising the domestic table of frequency allocations, eliminating restrictions on the use of the 12.7 gigahertz band by satellite services, and exploring whether any revisions to our Part 25 rules are needed to effectuate these changes. The Bureau recommends adoption of the item and requests editorial privileges for technical and conforming edits.
Thank you, Stephen. We will now hear comments from the bench, starting with Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I've consistently observed, we live in a golden era of commercial space. The pace of innovation.
Golden age.
Golden age. The pace of innovation is accelerating, and consumers are reaping the benefits. Satellite broadband systems promise more choice and better performance for many Americans, including those who live, work, and travel in some of the toughest to serve places. They can even improve the reach of terrestrial broadband networks through satellite backhaul. For the commercial space sector to reach its full potential, we must provide the spectrum it needs to continue its growth. That's why this item is so important. It will help ensure that we're meeting the moment to provide the spectrum needed for the satellite ecosystem to continue to thrive. I'm glad we've expanded the scope of the item beyond the initial upper 12 and 42 gigahertz bands. It shows we're serious about keeping the United States as a global leader in commercial space innovation. I'd like to thank the staff for their hard work on this item. It has my full support.
Thank you. Commissioner Symington.
Thanks very much. This is a big accomplishment by the Space Bureau. I know there was a little bit of ironic laughter when we said exciting satellite spectrum item, but it really is exciting. You know, when I started getting presentations and ex partes about this, I found myself asking E-band, W-band. You know, we're at a certain point we're going to run out of letters. I don't know if we're going to go to Greek alphabet, Hebrew alphabet, what. But at this point, we've expanded the reach of what we're looking at seriously at the Commission, where we have actionable rules to extremely high frequencies, now above 100 gigahertz consistently. And I think that's just a remarkable achievement in terms of making more out of the existing allocations and out of new technologies as they come online. In particular, I would note that the allocations for proposed for FSS uplink in W-band are an implicit recognition that terrestrial W-band applications are not going to be spatially in conflict. That is, you know, we're an FOD radar at an airport isn't going to be pointing in the same direction as an uplink. And this is, I think, going to continue raising the topic of what the spatialization of licenses and transmission looks like as we move increasingly to a high-frequency world where you can have multiple operators and services in the same frequencies in the same contour. So I would consider this an advance on many fronts, and congratulations to the Bureau for its great work on this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gomez.
As Commissioner, one of my priorities is to support innovation and competition in telecommunications, and a critical component of wireless innovation is having access to spectrum. So I'm glad to see this item seeks further comment about bands that have already been under discussion for more intensive use, and seeks additional comment, or initial comment, on use of 2 bands that are newly under consideration for satellite broadband services. So I look forward to seeing the docket develop, and I want to thank the Space Bureau for your work on this item.
Thank you, Commissioners. Earlier this year, I outlined what I described as a final frontiers agenda for the FCC. This particular effort is all about boosting America's space economy and ensuring that our businesses are able to dominate in orbit. To achieve this, we'll focus on a few key guide stars. There's a sort of a space thing, guide stars. A few key guide stars.
Clunky.
Yeah, it is. Those guide stars, so to speak, they are speed, simplicity, security, and satellite spectrum abundance. On all these fronts, I'm pleased with the progress that the agency is already making. On speed, we're clearing out application backlogs and reducing processing times at a record pace. On simplicity, we're working to eliminate unnecessary rules that throttle the satellite industry, such as obsolete power limits and cumbersome siting restrictions. On security, we already launched a proceeding that looks at bolstering and safeguarding the services provided by our GPS system. And today, our decision proposes a pathway for satellite spectrum abundance. Specifically, we're opening a rulemaking that could free up more than 20,000 megahertz of satellite broadband spectrum. And to put that number in context, 20,000 megahertz is more than the sum total of spectrum available for satellite systems today. And to be clear, abundant spectrum for satellite operations isn't just a nice-to-have thing. It's necessary for U.S. leadership. Every megahertz matters. When our satellite systems have abundant spectrum, America leads. Our economy grows. Our national security strengthens. And millions of Americans gain affordable access to broadband. Our global competitors are not waiting. China is rapidly expanding its own space capabilities, and we're not going to let America fall behind. That's why we're taking actions across multiple different spectrum bands today. In my longer statement for the record, I'll walk through each band and why we're targeting them and what's unique about them. But suffice to say, in this rulemaking, we're sending a clear signal. America is committed to leadership in space through a policy of satellite spectrum abundance. This positions us to lead international discussions, not follow frameworks established by others. It protects America's technological leadership for decades to come, and it helps American companies, not foreign competitors, develop the patents and set the standards that will govern global communications. Many thanks again to the FCC staff that worked hard on this item, including Stephen Duell, Jay Schwartz at the Space Bureau, Michael Ha, Saray Tai, and Nicholas Oros at OET, and Jessica Graffinius and Blaze Cinto at the Wireless Bureau. Very much appreciate your work, including finding new spectrum bands along the way. With that, we will proceed to a vote on the item. Commissioner Starks.
Approve.
Commissioner Symington.
Approve.
Commissioner Gomez.
Approve.
The chair votes yes as well. The item is adopted with editorial privileges as requested. Thanks to the team on that. That brings us to the end of our items for today. And I'll pause here. Would any of my colleagues like to make any announcements at this time? Starting with, I muted that part. I'll have to unmute that. Starting with my friend, Commissioner Starks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have an announcement. It is with a full and joyful heart that I announce that this will be my last open meeting as a commissioner. This has been the role and an honor of a lifetime. I tell my kids, and one day hopefully my kids' kids, that I am proud to be an FCC commissioner. I have traveled across the United States, high and low, rural, urban, exurbs. I've traveled across the globe, really. But I've never forgotten that it is the American people, first and foremost, that I serve. There will be another day, another time, where we'll look forward to celebrating together. I hope many of you will join me when that day comes here. We'll have to get it organized. But I'd like to say quite clearly that this was never about me. It was always about we. I'm proud of our work together, from industry advocates to nonprofits and public sector advocates as well. But in particular, a special and heartfelt thank you to the FCC staff, really the FCC team in my mind. I know and treasure you, and you are the best of public servants. It was an honor to serve alongside of you. And of course, to my fellow commissioners, a special thank you to you all, past and present. I've learned a lot from you, hopefully given you a couple of lessons along the way as well, and deeply appreciated you and our work together, and always the integrity and the decency with which you have approached your roles. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Starks, for your tremendous run in public service, starting in senior roles at the Department of Justice to the Enforcement Bureau here at the agency, to serving as the senior Democrat commissioner. I very, very much value our friendship, our work together, and we were able to collaborate on a number of items and get some really good, significant wins for innovation, for competition, for opportunities. You leave behind an impressive legacy in public service. I always learned a lot from you and benefited from the many events we held together, and I very much look forward to continuing to draw on your wisdom in the future wherever you end up. Hopefully you'll still pick up the phone and talk with all of us. But I want to wish you, your wife Lauren, your children, all the best. And again, I very much look forward to continuing our friendship and hopefully working relationship into the future. But thank you so much for your service. Thanks. Commissioner Symington.
Well, that's a tough act to follow. After this moving tribute from the chair and from the entire meeting, further comments would almost be superfluous, but I just want to also express my personal gratitude to Commissioner Starks for his collegiality and leadership throughout these 4.5 years that we've served together. And I'm looking forward to keeping in touch as well. I also just have an announcement regarding my own staff. I'd like to congratulate my long-term staffer and advisor, Sarah Ramju, who is now today graduating from the storied Catholic University law program. I understand that tends to lead to success at the commission, so I'm sure we'll be seeing more of her. But other than that, nothing. Thanks very much.
Commissioner Gomez.
So I too want to thank you, Commissioner Starks, for your long civil service, your commitment to public service. As the chairman noted, you weren't just at the FCC as a commissioner, you were in the Enforcement Bureau, you came from the Department of Justice, so you have been a long-time civil servant, and we thank you for that, and public servant. Now, while you left your mark on many proceedings, your commitment to public service and leadership on affordable connectivity and national security efforts have made a significant impact on the FCC's success. So I thank you not just as a colleague, but also as a friend, and I look forward to joining your celebration.
Thank you. Now, before we adjourn, we do have a couple of additional announcements to make. First up, what we call the AAA Award. I'd like to take a moment to announce that the FCC is seeking nominations for the FCC Chairman's 2025 Awards for Advancement in Accessibility. This year is the 35th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act and the 15th anniversary of the CVAA, which we implement. In honor of those anniversaries, the FCC is soliciting nominations for individuals who have made lasting and impactful contributions to the advancement of accessible communications, technologies, and services in the fields of policy, advocacy, research, and design. Specifically, we're seeking nominations for individuals in the following categories: consumer advocate, industry leader, educator or researcher, and next generation leader. We released a public notice just yesterday with more information about the nominating process, so please check that out and submit your nominations. Moving on to some FCC retirements. First up is Commissioner Starks, who is retiring. I'm kidding. He is retiring, though. He is retiring. First up is Charlene Lagerwerf, who's retiring from the Office of International Affairs, Global Strategy and Negotiations branch after a 34-year career. Charlene came to the FCC from the USDA's Agricultural Research Service. She served for many years as a lead negotiator of cross-border wireless agreements between the FCC and Mexico, and her work on these agreements not only allowed for deployment of new services and mitigation of interference, but served as a blueprint for agreements that followed. So we wish Charlene a well-deserved retirement. Sharon Kelly, our longest-serving OGC attorney, recently retired from the FCC after 44 years of service. Sharon joined the commission under former Chairman Mark Fowler. She spent the latter part of her FCC career helping to build the agency's ethics practice and is known for navigating thorny issues and providing not only well-researched and nuanced reasoning, but also practical guidance. She's been invaluable to OGC and the commission. She's got impeccable instincts, extraordinary dedication to OGC's mission, so she'll be greatly missed, and we wish her the very best in her retirement. Joseph Hill, Deputy Chief of the Satellite Licensing Division in the Space Bureau, will be retiring on May 31st with over 40 years of federal service, including 24 at the FCC. He served as the lead technical expert for all U.S. satellite network registrations filed at the ITU, among many other important responsibilities. He'll be greatly missed, and thank you for your service. Lisa Sachs is retiring from the commission in April after more than 23 years in the Enforcement Bureau's Market Disputes Resolution Division. Respected for her encyclopedic knowledge of the commission's pole attachment precedent, which is complicated, an ability to broker settlements and even the most contentious litigations, Lisa is going to be sorely missed as both a colleague and a friend to so many here. Lisa Booley will be retiring after 30 years of the commission, including stints in what was the Common Carrier Bureau, what is still OGC litigation, and most recently, the Enforcement Bureau's Market Dispute Resolution Division. Lisa B., as she's affectionately known, is a diligent, meticulous, and thoughtful attorney who handled some of the most challenging formal complaint cases at the agency and rulemaking orders, and is obviously held in very high regard by her colleagues throughout the agency. Next up is Alex Starr. Alex began his FC career in 1996 and served as the chief of the Enforcement Bureau's Market Disputes Resolution Division for 14 years. Did a stint at AT&T for 11 years, then returned to EB just in 2023. I'm told beneath a very kind, unassuming exterior, Alex possesses a very, very keen intellect, and he's always ensured the excellence in the FCC's work product. Mindy Littell. Mindy retired recently from the commission after 31 years of continuous service, the majority of which were in the Enforcement Bureau. Mindy worked tirelessly for the commission and the American public, combating fraud, waste, and abuse, including in the Lifeline program. the ACP program and its predecessor, EBB. She worked on several cases that uncovered significant fraud, including a fine of $62 million in one case, $23 million in another, in a consent decree. Her friends and colleagues at the Commission and all of us wish her a well-earned and wonderful retirement. Last is Susan Jordan. Susan is leaving behind a legacy of hard work and unwavering commitment that has positively impacted many, many bureaus and offices after 36 years of dedicated service here at the agency. For the past 22 years, she's been a cornerstone of the Enforcement Bureau, serving as an administration management specialist in the Office of Management and Resources. With a quiet yet powerful presence, Susan consistently went above and beyond to ensure every task was completed seamlessly, was always willing to lend a helping hand. So her impact will be missed, but we wish her well on retirement. And with that, Madam Secretary, will you please announce the next date for the Commission's monthly agenda meeting?
The next agenda meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Thursday, June 26, 2025.
Until then, we stand adjourned.
All right, thank you, everybody. We'll be starting the chairman's press conference. I just ask that all conversations be taken outside so we can get started. And for the members of the press, if you could please identify yourself and your publication before you ask your question, that would be great. And on that note, we'll hand it over to the chairman. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Nick, for the half applause. I appreciate it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our regularly scheduled Thursday. I know we were thrown off last week. I think it was a Monday meeting. But good to see you all. We're heading into a three-day weekend, Memorial Day, obviously, and so we want to start out by recognizing and expressing our appreciation to all the men and women in service who made the ultimate sacrifice, and we'll be thinking about that as we head into this weekend. On the FCC front, one issue we've been continuing to work on, including since the last press conference, is spectrum. You saw that today where we took action on the satellite side to look at freeing up potentially 20,000 megahertz of spectrum for satellites. I also want to highlight the work that Congress has been doing on this, including passing legislation this morning that would include reauthorizing the FCC Spectrum Auction Authority, and that follows President Trump's call earlier this week for Congress to do exactly that with at least 600 megahertz of spectrum. We get that done. Frankly, I think that's I'm a little biased, but I think that's one of the most important things that Congress can get done. It generates, obviously, hundreds of billions of dollars over the years. It helps to increase competition. It's deflationary. It drives prices down. So I'm very pleased with the momentum that we're seeing on spectrum issues right now. Another good news, last week the agency approved the Verizon Frontier deal. That's going to help unleash billions of dollars of new investment. Some people are particularly pleased with that here. And also got a number of other good public interest wins through that deal. Since our last meeting, we've also provided more details on the top-to-bottom review that we've conducted of the FCC's contracts. We've saved millions of dollars in the near term. And looking out in terms of contract ceilings, we've reduced those by over $500 million, which will hopefully lead to significant savings there as well. With that, I'm happy to pause and open it up for questions.
I wanted to ask about the U.S. Cyber Trust Mark. My understanding is that you're trying to get more information about how to ground it in national security. I wanted to ask about next steps and where you see that program moving forward.
Yeah, we don't have any news to break on that. That's a proceeding that's been worked on, obviously, over the years at the agency, received bipartisan support over the years, has continued to be stood up. We don't have any sort of specific announcement to make on next steps in that one right now.
Hello, Ted Johnson from Deadline. I wanted to ask about where you are in the timeline on the CBS or on the Skydance Paramount merger. Are you close to rendering a decision on that? And also on the CBS complaint, where is that in the timeline?
Yeah, no news to break on those two things that are before the FCC on the transaction. What I've said continues to be true, which is we're just running our normal review process on that. We've not made a decision at this point on either the merits or timing. It just continues to be under review. I mean, again, we're in a little bit of a unique timing period where the transition, January 20th, coming in, standing up new leadership, reviewing everything, and we're working through a lot of transactions that are on the FCC's plate. We started, obviously, with a T-Mobile Lumen. We just sort of cut through the Verizon Frontier. You know, we'll have other sort of transactions that we're teeing up for final decision, but everything is just working its way through the normal processing queue at this point.
I mean, do you have an estimate, like a matter of months, or do you anticipate by the end of the summer?
Yeah, no news to break on that one way or the other. Again, it's just the normal process right now, but we haven't made a final decision on the merits or timing. We're working our way through, all these transactions that are before the agency right now.
I'm Maggie McFarland. I'm with Broadband Breakfast. My question is, President Trump has fired Democratic commissioners at other independent agencies, including the Federal Trade Commission. If President Trump asked your opinion about whether he should fire Commissioner Gomez, what would or have you said to him?
Yeah, I feel like there's a baseline, no answering of speculative questions on that one. Look, at the end of the day, the FCC is somewhat differently situated than other agencies in the sense that the Communications Act, as set by Congress, does not include for-cause removal protections for FCC commissioners. That goes for everybody that serves on the agency. So.
Okay, I just wanted to ask about a two-part question. The parts are completely different. Part one is...
Howard, that sounds like two questions to me.
Well,
I don't know,
well,
but we'll see if we'll allow it.
There's four of us.
Okay.
So, and I used to fish, and I know if you put multiple lines in the water, you have a better chance of catching a fish. So
Not biting, Howard. I'm not going to bite. Not doing it.
I wanted to just ask you just briefly if there's an update on Section 230, and then secondly, I know that you talked on the Hill about this a little bit, but I just wanted to ask about staffing levels. You already gave an update on that this week, but how do you, I guess I'm wondering what this thought process to make sure that the people who leave are the right people, and, because, we've heard that some of the offices like OET have lost quite a few people, so, and those, for someone who's a Catholic grad, those should both be easy questions.
Well, look, on the staffing front, we've provided transparency on the data. These have all been people that have moved on through what we describe as natural attrition. So some of it is taking advantage of an early retirement window that my predecessor had opened up. Some of it was fork in the road. Some of it was taking advantage of early retirement under normal procedures. And again, I think this is a natural transition period, both transitions in administrations, transitions to returning back into the building. So I think the numbers that we see are very much in line with the current dynamic that we're in. We haven't done any, reduction in force. We haven't done any mass personnel decisions, and these are up, decisions for everybody to make. And I think if you look back at Chairwoman Rosenworcel, she had a lot of announcements as well that she was making. So again, right now it's natural attrition, and we're not under any constraint at the moment in terms of the agency's work product. I think it's been a very, very busy first 100+ days, and we haven't had any issue with getting that type of a work done. So I still feel very confident in our staffing levels that we have exactly what we need to get the job done. I'm sure we continue to do that, regardless of whether there's more fluctuation on the numbers.
You didn't answer the 230 question.
And on 230, I got no news to break there. I do think that it's important, and one of the priorities that I've set out is working to restore free speech. One focus that I've had there is some of the censorship activities that we're seeing take place, in particular in Europe. Europe stood up their new Digital Services Act, their DSA. One of the first things that I did as chair was a visit to Europe and express my view, consistent with where the Trump administration has been, that not only is the DSA have issues in terms of resulting in greater censorship of online speech in Europe, but there's potential extraterritorial application, either expressly or practically, in terms of how these platforms have to be designed. And that's something that's concerning to me. I just met with one of the officials from the European Commission here at the FCC and continue to express my view and concern that some of their actions, including under the DSA, could result in excessive online censorship. And so this is an issue, whether it's Europe or across the board, that we're going to continue pushing at the FCC, but no specific announcement with respect to Section 230 in particular.
Okay, that was like two keepers. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, appreciate it. Thanks all. We'll see you around.
Thank you, Chairman. I will now hand over the Bureau press conference to my colleague, Will Whitequist. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. So we'll do the Bureau press conference. We'll go through the items that were voted on the meeting today, and if you have any questions on them, we'll call up the team. So OET's bad labs rule. Howard, I'm guessing? You have a question? I think
Yeah, bad labs rule does seem like a loaded statement, but I wanted to ask the usual question. There was I would say a middling amount of outreach on that and ex parte filings, especially compared to like the foreign ownership item. Were there any changes that you would like to note at this point, or anything of substance from what was proposed by Chairman Carr?
No, the item between the public release and what was adopted today, minimal changes on substance. We did clean up a number of the rules. We added the full cost-benefit analysis, and otherwise a number of clarifications in various places. But substantively, there's really no change.
A full cost benefit. So there was like just I can look at the draft, but it was just a partial before. I don't know what that means.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
any other questions on this item?
Great. Thanks.
So next we have the Wireline Competition Bureau's. All right, BCB. Welcome to the stage.
Hey, Howard.
So the same question, but there were fairly minimal. I think there was like one ex parte filing, but it sounded like Commissioner Gomez had gotten a few changes. But is there anything you can provide to us as a sort of early update on what's coming from the commission?
The changes from the circulated or the
from the draft version.
Minor changes, mostly to the legal authority section. The core rationale and authority is the same. We sought further comment on questions about individuals with dual or more citizenship and due diligence for publicly traded companies. And also, I think, whether revocations should require a commission-level action.
Okay, cool. Thank you. That's helpful, actually. Thank you very much.
Any other questions on this item? Thank you. All right, last, certainly not least, Space Bureau Satellite. Howard, thank you. Jay really appreciates that. If you left them out, it would be very upsetting for all of us.
We wanted you to.
Same question?
Well, I mean about a different. It's not about the foreign ownership stuff anymore. So I'm just teasing. On the bad labs rule. No, I actually had a specific question. Well, it's more generic. Like, were there changes to the item? I'm not actually covering this one, but the reporter who has also wondered if what is it, 51.4 to 52.4 ban was added to the draft. FNPR, SpaceX, and Amazon had advocated. That was a specific question, but I'm not as familiar with it.
Sure, yes. Since the item was made publicly available, there were, as a result of requests to add some additional bands on it. One of them was the 51.4 to 52.4, and the other one was in the so-called W band frequencies, sort of above 90 gigahertz. And those were added to the item at the notice of proposed rulemaking.
Okay. And were there any other? That sounds like something somewhat substantial.
That's very, yeah. It was a change,
Two whole bands.
and then there were some other minor changes. Mostly, there was a question about lifting of the freeze that's currently in the band, and we see comment on that. So.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Great. Thank you. And with that, I'll hand it off to Commissioner Gomez. Thank you very much.
Good morning. So, unfortunately, this week we saw yet another alarming example of the administration and the FCC pushing their campaign of censorship and control. Sadly, on censorship, They found it easier to force private companies to do their dirty work. Once again, another member of the press, this time the president of CBS News, Wendy McMahon, was forced to resign. She did so because their parent company, Paramount, is continuing to exert pressure on CBS News and their independent reporting to satisfy the ideological demands from the FCC and from the administration, all in a desperate attempt to win regulatory approval of their pending transaction. It is beyond alarming. Journalists are being silenced simply because their reporting may threaten the ambitions of their corporate owners. This will only embolden the administration, already hell-bent on censoring speech and controlling content. Not being satisfied with censoring the news, the FCC and the administration have also engaged in a far more sinister effort to control content and actions by private companies. We've seen attempts to micromanage employment practices within private media companies, including threatening to impose heavy regulatory burdens on those companies that require the FCC's approval for their transactions. Take, for example, the 11th hour approval of a transaction between Verizon and Frontier. This Friday afternoon, the FCC decided only after the company agreed to eliminate programs and initiatives that were meant to increase fairness in hiring in the workplace. First, let me just say this. A transaction of this magnitude should have been decided by a full commission vote, not in a backroom deal. Second, I strongly disagree with Verizon's capitulation. These companies must realize that by giving in today, they will endanger themselves and others to further demands from this administration to censor and control their speech and actions tomorrow. Because these are not good faith regulatory efforts, these are intimidation tactics meant to censor speech and control content. But this never before seen form of government control received a strong warning from the Fifth Circuit this week. While I disagreed with their ruling on media transparency, I saw their reasoning on the limits of the FCC's authority over hiring practices as a clear warning to this agency and its current direction. In it, the court declared that the FCC's authority to act in the public interest does not extend outside of the statutorily prescribed tasks that Congress has instructed the FCC to carry out. What this means is the current FCC has no authority to go against lawful, merit-based hiring decisions by private companies or to target them because of their use of terms like diversity, equity, and inclusion. Because let's be honest, the FCC's ideological crusade has never been about fairness, it's about control. It's a new and dangerous form of speech policing that has no place in free society. We must continue to defend the First Amendment from those who use it as a weapon against the very freedoms it protects. This is why I launched my First Amendment tour. And I'm happy to share that next week I will be in Los Angeles for our very first stop outside of Washington. We'll be sharing more details on that soon, but in the meantime, I want to thank you for being here, and I'm happy to take your questions.
Okay, Commissioner Gomez, I was going to ask two questions that were consistent sort of with what I already asked the chairman. And I'll start with Section 230. We've heard that there's some reluctance and that there's a lot of questions about the legal standing. And, you mentioned the fifth. I know it's not completely related, but are you expecting to see something on Section 230, more on that? And what is your initial take on that?
I don't know what this commission's going to do. I have spoken up about possible FCC activity in this area because of the reporting that was done previously. I don't believe this FCC has any authority to act pursuant to Section 230. Congress did not actually direct the FCC to do anything in that section. And I think it would be very difficult for any FCC action to survive judicial scrutiny given our new standards under which we are subject.
And then the second question is, so we have numbers, on employees there are some numbers out there now. But then anecdotally, I'm just hearing from people, there's a lot of signs of departures at places like, one of the ones I always worry about is OET, because so much of the wireless agenda hangs on the ability of OET to work through these complicated spectrum issues. What's your sense on that? Like, have you been asking questions? Are you getting answers? Like, what can you, from what you can tell, what's happening at the FCC in terms of the staffing levels?
I only know what the chairman has reported in terms of exact numbers, but I know what I hear and what I'm watching. I am going to more retirement parties than I've gone to in a long time, and the length of time and length of service that you are seeing from these folks that are leaving just shows you the amount of brain drain that we are going to experience. This is going to continue, of course. We're only reporting who's actually leaving today. This is going to continue month after month after month, at a minimum because of the fork in the road, but also because of this attempt by this administration to terrorize our staff throughout the federal government into leaving. I think it's cutting off your nose to spite your face, because it's going to be very difficult going forward to continue to meet our statutory directives and the very workload that we have, and especially as we lose this institutional knowledge that we're losing right now.
And then just one follow-up question. I think we both were here during the Clinton administration, not literally here, but they riffed a lot of people, but it was like a multi-year negotiated process. Are you concerned that the current process, just about the process that's being followed, that there doesn't seem to be as much behind-the-scenes work that's going into it this time around as opposed to the example of what happened under the Clinton administration?
Well, I think this is administration-wide. The fork in the road had no process to it whatsoever. It was simply do this or else. We did have a thoughtful process with the early retirements. I am sure that a lot of people who took early retirement were actually motivated by the morale issues that this administration has started through their admitted pressure to terrorize staff in order to get them to leave. That is the goal that has been stated quite forcefully by our head of the Office of Management and Budget. So I don't know what's coming. I know that this is something that is an administration-wide effort to determine what to do with every agency throughout the administration. I hope it is thoughtful. I hope it follows the legal processes instead of some made-up process. And I hope that whatever is done, it's done with a scalpel and not with a chainsaw. Because what we do serves consumers, it serves the public interest, and it serves innovation, it protects competition. What we do is important to our economy. So I want to make sure that whatever the FCC does going forward to implement this administration's directives is done very thoughtfully and very carefully.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
I have a question. With Commissioner Starks departing, how do you see the dynamics of the commission shifting?
Well, first of all, let me just say I am very grateful to Commissioner Starks for his service. He really has been a long-standing public servant and has done very great work, and I'm going to miss him very much. We are going to go into a point where we will have a majority for the Republicans, and I will be in the minority, and it does change the dynamics. It's a lot easier for the majority to get their policies put forward, but it's not going to stop me from speaking out, and I will do my best to add value in everything that we are doing. We do have a very collegial relationship among all of the commissioners, and I do find that Chairman Carr is very thoughtful and will listen, and hopefully I will be able to add value as well.
Commissioner, You just spoke of what has been happening with the investigations of whether it be news distortion or DEI of some private companies. What do you think that they should do at this point, or do you believe that the FCC is holding off any action so no lawsuit can be filed?
I do believe that a lot of the actions that the FCC has taken so far have are not appealable. Threatening enforcement action, initiating enforcement action is not appealable. So I do believe that this is a campaign of harassment and intimidation in order to get parties to change their practices voluntarily. And the problem with that is capitulation breeds capitulation. What I would really like to see is for these entities to have the courage to push back, especially when they're asked to do something by a regulator wielding its licensing authority in contravention of the First Amendment, the Communications Act.
Do you believe that the chairman is delaying action on some of these items? For example, CBS, the CBS complaint and the Skydance Paramount merger?
I have no insight into how the chairman is managing the docket right now. But I will say it's pretty amazing that the Verizon Frontier deal was approved the day after it filed its letters committing to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion practices.
Thank you.
Sarah Friedman, Inside Cybersecurity. I wanted to ask about the Title II reclassification and net neutrality. Is that something that you're going to be focusing on more now that you will have a Republican-led commission, or is that something that you think will be happening in the courts?
I have encouraged Congress to provide us authority to establish guardrails on broadband internet access services. As I said during the meeting, it's pretty amazing that we have this major national security item that doesn't apply to the major telecommunications service of our time right now. We have incidental ways where we can touch them a little bit, but we can't because the courts have determined we don't have authority to do so. So it's up to Congress to give us that authority, and I think it's important that they do so.
When one of the last actions under Chairwoman Rosenworcel was issuing a declaratory ruling and further direction on related to Cell Typhoon and the decision there, the Biden under DHS, they paused their investigation. Do you see that as an important issue moving forward, and how would you address when it comes to cybersecurity threats?
I mean, I think it's really important that the commission exercise its authority in order to address the security of the networks. It's alarming. The Salt Typhoon incident was very alarming. And so whatever it is that we can do in order to make sure that our networks are secure, both as an agency as well as with our partners throughout the federal government, that is what we should do. Okay? Thank you.